Meeting, please come to order. We'll rise, and Chairman of the School Board will lead us in pledge allegiance to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you. As you know, this is the deliberative meeting, preparation for the March 12th voting. Encouraged to participate. We can amend, ask questions, and if you do want to participate from the floor, line up at the mic here, that makes it a little more convenient. And if you're making a motion, you could write it down for us so that we can record it. And if you've spoken once, respect the next person before you ask to speak a second time, if you don't mind. Safety items, the exit to my right, my left. We have some folks here that most likely will want to speak, and we'd like to cover that at the beginning here. So, Barbara Chase, who's the special ed teacher, maybe you could just stand so that we know who you are. Okay, in the back over there. And then there are three people from the Bonnet, Page, and Stone Incorporated and Orange Street Architects. It's Garrett Salter, Keith McVeigh, and Carl Barker. These guys will be probably speaking. They are attorneys with us tonight, Mike Elwell. And then, is it Raquel Cox, Butternut Community School? Is she here? Is that how you pronounce it? Rochelle. Okay. And Eric Daffenroot. Is that how you pronounce it? Okay. And Kelly Nolan. And one more person on the back too. Then at the head table, Patty Drapo, Greg Cook on the board, on the school board, Leslie Robbins, Millie Nelson, Kim Woodson, who's the vice chair of the board, and we get the chair. I already mentioned Mike Elwell and Superintendent Steve Nivas. Anybody else that wishes or may wish to speak who's not a registered voter? You need permission. Oh, yeah, I'm going to get to him. Anybody else? Okay, we do have a person who would love to be here, but he had an accident recently and he's with us by phone. So bear with us on making that remote connection here. So is he on now? Good evening, Tom. Yeah, so Tom Hall says, yeah, good evening, folks.
I can hear you.
I can hear you. I can't hear Bella, though.
Okay, so Tom, he didn't hear the preliminaries?
He didn't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now, Tom?
I can tell it was Carol, so that's it.
That's who's speaking to you, so that's good.
So this will be, now, are we going, yeah, we're going to test a little bit here, bear with us just for a couple of minutes. So good evening, Tom. If you could respond to that, that would be good.
Good evening.
You guys hear that?
No.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. All right, so we're going to, we'll try that. We may have to adjust it a little bit. But, and I don't think I followed up on the question. Anybody else want to speak? Or may want to speak? That, not registered. So, the card, all you folks here who are planning to vote, just hold your card up so everybody can see who's planning to vote. Thank you. So the preliminaries, there are a couple of housekeeping issues, I'll just make mention of them. A couple of typos and insignificance. Really have no real impact on the meeting. One of them is recommended, an article recommended by the school. I think it was published at 4-0, and there was one abstention. For the housekeeping point before we start, there's no questions. Maybe we're going to start with Article 1. I'm sorry, Article 2. Article 1 will be on the ballot for March 12th. So Article 2. To see if the Littleton School District will vote to raise and appropriate to some $900,000 gross budget for the acquisition of land, architectural, and engineering services for a future elementary school project, and to authorize the issuance of not more than $900,000 of bonds or notes in accordance with the provisions of the Municipal Finance Act, RSA 33, and to authorize the municipal officials to issue and negotiate such bonds or notes and to determine the rate of interest thereon, and to authorize the use of up to $150,000 of surplus available at June 30th, 2019 to reduce the amount borrowed, and further to appropriate the sum of $196,519 for the first year's interest and principal payments, 3/5 ballot vote required, recommended by the school board 5-0, recommended by the advisory budget committee 7-0, and we expect a motion from Ann Wiggett, chairman of the board, and a second from Kim. All right. So that gets the motion on the floor. Presentation typically follows. So Ann will be up next. You want to speak from here, Ann?
So to begin with, I'd like to give you a little history for some of you that don't know about Lakeway. The building, the original building, was built in 1950, and it was one level to house kindergarten through grade 6. The next addition was the second level, which was in 1959. In 1978, the second addition was added on, which is the White Mountain Multiple Handicaps Unit. That's where the administrative offices are today. The third addition in 1982 put on a multi-purpose room, 2 kindergarten rooms, and 2 grade 1 rooms. Then in 1989, because we had so many students, there was portables on the playground out back. And in 1991, that was the grade 6 class. They moved up to the middle school. And then in 2001, the kindergarten wing was built. There was 5 classrooms and a renovation of the 4th grade. In 2002, they added the modular in the parking lot. So that has 2 classrooms, a library, and 2 restrooms. And then in 2004, we added the elevator. So between 1974 and 82,
Kindergarten through grade 2 was housed at St. Rose / the old Daisy Bronson building because of enrollment. Since 2001, we have had to lease parking space for the staff across the road and 20 spaces from the old Courier building, which is where the Faith Bible parking lot is today. Due to the age of the building, upkeep and maintenance, and knowing the educational needs of the 21st century, the school district has since 2007 had articles on the school warrants for land acquisition and school construction. The school district requested a feasibility study in September of 2017, which was done by Kyle Barker of Warren Street Architects. This report is dated June 1st, 2018, and a public report was presented at Lakeway on June 4th, 2018. There were 80 deficiencies noted in the areas of site, envelope, life safety, building codes, structural, accessibility, indoor environmental quality, bill service, interior, security, and safety, and additions such as space needs and reconfiguration of core facilities. These are some of the areas that the school district has worked on to maintain over the years to keep our children safe and secure, as well as to maintain a good learning environment. However, many of the systems are at the end of their life cycle and need to be replaced. Therefore, the school district established the Lakeway Facilities Advisory Committee in early July with a statement of mission, which reads, "The Littleton School District is dedicated to the complete education, growth, and safety of each student. The superintendent, administration, and the Board of Education recognize the importance of maintaining all buildings and general facilities that contribute to the delivery of this educational experience. This district seeks to collaborate with the community of Littleton by the assembly of a committee comprised of diverse community members who will assist in the process to produce a plan of action that will address the physical needs of Mildred C. Lakeway Elementary School and thereby protect the current and future investments of the town of Littleton." There was also a statement of purpose given to this committee. The Lakeway Advisory Committee will meet over a period of time to be determined at the initial meeting, to be informed of the significant issues facing the 70-year-old elementary school located at 325 Union Street, Littleton, New Hampshire. The committee will be presented with and review an in-depth structural and engineering report produced by Carl Barker, architect with Warren Street Architectural Firm. The committee will work collaboratively to determine a plan of action that will best serve the students as well as the entire community of Littleton. The committee will submit a recommended course of action to the Board of Education no later than November 5th, 2018, at which time the committee will sunset. The organizational structure of the Lakeway Advisory Committee will be formed by the committee with the assistance of Kyle Barker at the first meeting. The Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Stephen Niles, Board of Education members, and Lakeway Principal Crystal Martin will also be in attendance throughout the process. Members of the committee: Ralph Hodgman, Chair; Ron Bolt, Secretary; Linda Massanella; Chris Bars; Tom Claddy; Stan Fillion; Sadie Morris; Kate Paradise; and Tiffany Howard. The committee held 9 meetings through the month of July through November. with the expectation to deliver a recommendation to the Board of Education by November 5th. This process from Kyle Barker's report was to review the three options: renovate in 1 year, renovate over 5 to 6 years, or 3, replace the elementary school. And that was also to discuss the pros and cons, including costs of each option. Their recommendation to the school board was to replace the building at a new site on November 5th. In the interest of time, the video is on the website and will be shown at Lakeway open houses with dates to be published. We have with us here tonight Kyle Barker, architect from Warren Street Architects, Keith McVeigh, president, lead project manager, estimating, and Barrett Salter, project manager, technology of Bonnet, Page and Stone, and members of the LEFAC committee, if there's any further questions to be asked. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Yes,
Okay, good. If you don't mind. There are other people that would like to speak.
John
Is that-
Simon.
Is that how you want to do it, Steve? Let him take it. Oh, no, that's fine. Either that or line up at the,
Oh, that's right.
sure. Yeah, no, that's all right.
John Simon, and this land that
Can you hear John?
we are looking at right now, this land was purchased back in the 60s and early 70s, if I remember, at one time, by a host of business people from Littleton at $500 a share, thinking that the school at the time was going to build a new high school and incorporate it with surrounding schools. That fell through over the years. However, the land back then was not good land. And I believe that most of this land has been developed. And the land that's left, the quality of, has anybody on the board walked this land? Okay, and the quality of the land, I understand, is wet. Is that true? And if it is true, is this going to cost us additional monies to overcome the wet land? If you remember when White Mountains Regional built their high school back in the 60s, they built it on a swamp. And they have paid financially dearly for that over the years until they finally got it corrected.
Yes, this piece of property has been studied a couple of times in the past. In fact, 2008, there was a bond proposal for a new school on the site. And during that process, the land was surveyed, wetlands were mapped, and there was a geotechnical report. So all those things that you mentioned, yes, some of that is true, but that's been factored into the designs that we're coming up with, and we're well aware of the issues that we need to deal with and have ways of dealing with that. One of the problems is that they don't make land anymore, so when we look at properties, we got to look at where it's located and how it affects other things that are going on, such as the proximity of this piece of property to the high school, and we have to deal with those issues such as the wetlands. Now, there are two pockets of wetlands that are fairly significant. One is along this backside in here, which you can see we're not developing, and the other one is along this backside in here, which we are not developing. So we're avoiding the wetlands and putting the school, or suggesting we put the school on the best piece throughout this parcel. So we're actually trying to use some of those issues that you mentioned to our advantage, and helping to create buffers for the neighbors, having to use the land where the geotechnical report says the best, and otherwise, working with what we've got.
But can you guarantee that once you start building, that you won't run into some problems?
John, if, we should have a mic so everybody could hear, John. Actually, you use that center mic.
Again, can you guarantee that there will be no problems once you start breaking ground and start the additional structure? Will the wetlands, could they affect the good land that's there right now?
I don't have x-ray vision to know exactly what's underneath the soils in there, but we've done the proper investigation to understand the land, and the process that we go through with the contractor ensures that each step of the way that we do what we need to do to solve those problems that you mentioned. So I can't guarantee it, but we've built many successful projects with properties that are this challenging or even worse.
Yeah. No, that's okay. You can go. Yeah.
Somebody else?
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Frank.
Thank you. Frank Gramo. You got a nice, pretty school there. I think
Yeah.
angles and all kinds of curves and stuff, don't that drive the cost up? I know everybody wants something nice and pretty, but the practical side is, do we educate our kids, or do we spend a lot on curves and things like that? Let's say it does get that far. Thank you. I have one other question, probably not related to this right here, but go ahead, please. Thank you.
Certainly curves and angles add to the cost. But when you're talking about a 60,000 square foot building, having some angles are hard to avoid. If you look at the shape of this building, it's actually 1, 2, 3 large boxes. So it's actually fairly simple. The angles help to maximize the daylight. What this circle here is actually the path of the sun to try to maximize solar gain to all the classrooms. This helps with education, it helps with heating, it helps with a lot of stuff. And it works with the classrooms and how it fits on the inside. So again, you talk about a building this large and something as important as a school, we can't be limited to simply one big square box, but I have tried as much as possible to address your concern in a shape like this. Now, one of the things to keep in mind is that this layout was to show that this would work on the site. The design of this building hasn't happened yet, and that what the warrant article is about is to provide enough design fees that we can go through that process. And so after this, if it were to pass, the committee, the school board, we would work together with coming up with a new plan, and if the directive from them was, no, we do want simply a big box, that is what would be presented the following year.
I have one more question, and I don't think you could answer this, but this goes back to the purchase, the proposed purchase of this property. Was anything else in town looked at, like maybe the old shoe shop? That's a big parking lot, flat area. Tear the building down, you're off the main road. I know that's one of the concerns. Is anything like that looked at? Or has Faith Bible Church and the buildings above that has anybody asked about buying that? And I know you're still on that main drag, and that is a concern. But we do have a police department here, you know, and if they got to spend a little time there, so be it. That's my other question. Thank you very much.
If my memory serves me correctly, there's been several committees looking at different sites. And in 2016, there was a committee made of Chris Bars, I think you were on that committee. Melanie Nelson was on that committee. Jim Annan, and a few others I can't think of right now. But they looked at about 16 different areas, and they had a whole sheet that said, you know, was this good, was this good, was this good, was this good? They came up with 3 recommendations, and this site was the top one, and always has been, because of the different things that have happened.
What was the other 2? I'm curious.
The other 2 was up at the convent, the Sisters Property, Daughters of Charity, and then there was another parcel behind the Greenwood Acres, which was about 200, I think it's the Roberts Trust property, about 200 acres, has never been developed.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
A If you'd like to speak, just go ahead and line up behind Tom, that would be helpful.
Tom Alt. Just to step back a little further in history, this town, the voters in this town were convinced back in the late 80s that the Eaton property was the place to build the next school. We had to have the land then, and we had to have the school then. And for the last several decades, 3 decades probably, that land has sat there doing nothing, and even though it was recommended back then, it was the ideal piece. Now, it obviously has been decided that it's not suitable, so it should be part of the discussion, if for nothing more than that land represents some value that should be considered as this whole financial discussion goes forward. And if we aren't going to use that land for its proposed purpose, we should be considering whether it's at the school session or at the town session, or it's all taxpayer interest. That should be a part of the discussion to make sure that if we're going to go somewhere else, like upon Elm Street, that perhaps we could get some value to put towards this idea from that property.
In about, I can't remember, when Concordia was here and Mr. Tim Vaughn was on the board, we had this group of people of about 100, and they all had to they was put into different groups, they had to do different things. They definitely looked at the Eaton property, which is owned by the town since 1995. And Sampson Road, Richmond Street, what's the other one, Brian? Yeah. That property is very steep. We did have on the warrant, I think in 2007, was to convey the land to the school, and the town also had to convey the land to the school, and we had to accept. I think those passed, but it became that the property was much too steep, and the grade elevations were greater than what you see here. And I think the access roads was going to be something tremendous.
I'm concerned about Elm Street.
Okay, I didn't mention this earlier, I think, but if you announce your name before.
Oh, I'm sorry. Norm Allaire.
Okay.
Have you guys figured out a bus route to get to this school? And if you have, can you let us know what it is? And if it's Elm Street, I have my doubts about that. It's hard, you have hardly enough to get 2 cars up and down that street. If that's where the buses are going, and we're going to need construction done on the road, that's going to add more cost to the school. The other concern I have is the sewer line. Where is that headed? And because you've got a lot of fixture units coming out of that building. And will the present sewer line take care of it?
Certainly. So the first question is Elm Street's role in this. And Elm Street is over here.
Right.
And there'll be an emergency roadway connecting to the property in the back, but that is not going to be open to the general public. Everybody else would come up through Oak Hill and onto the property here. What we've shown is kind of hard to see on this graphic, but we've shown cars queued up along here and around the bus loop to show the capacity inside the site would handle all the traffic that for the parents picking up and dropping off. The buses themselves would come up in the same route, but then go around the back and park in the back.
Yeah, but are the buses coming up Elm Street from Main Street?
Can't use that road.
Okay.
Can't use it.
All right.
And so the other question you asked was about sewer. And so our team has connected with the utilities to see where the best connections are, and the town told us that essentially at the intersection of Oak Hill and Elm is the best place to connect into. So right now the plan is to come out of the building straight over to what I'm calling Oak Hill Extension, and then down to that intersection.
So is the existing line that's there now that you're gonna be tying into, that'll handle the school?
That's what we've been told. There is plans for updating Tuck Lane down to Rock Strain, but there's no telling if that's gonna happen before the school is built or not. There's no time frame for that. But there are plans in the works.
Okay, thank you.
Afternoon, my name is Fern Bud Foster, everybody calls me Bud.
Tip that mic up a little bit.
How's that, Carol, any better?
I think it's better.
Better?
Can you hear, Bud? Okay.
I'd like to know how many acres this whole tract is that you're looking at. It's part one of a series of questions. 29 acres, okay. I can remember when I was in this school back in the late 60s, they were talking about buying this Greenwood property. And since then, developers have come in and bought and developed and did their thing. And you can bet your bottom dollar, they built on the best land. They didn't leave the best land for last. I was in the logging business all my life and my brother had a big company. Some of you know me, some of you don't. Don't make no difference. But if you can find 25 acres up on that hillside that doesn't have a lot of wetlands in it, I would like to go walk around with you and look at it, because I know quite a bit about wetlands. I used to have to file wetland permits for every job that I ever did. And I could get away with way more than you could get away with because of forestry. It was temporary and they let you do things that you guys cannot get away with. It's impossible. So I would find it very hard to believe that you're going to find that big a piece of ground up on that. I've hunted there, I've walked through it, I know a little bit about this. Now to get back to the piece up off Richmond Street, I can't remember the name of it now, and I helped buy it.
Eaton property.
Eaton property, yes. I was instrumental in buying that. I was on the budget committee and pushed hard for it. Is it a perfect piece of property? No. Does it have a steep entrance going into it? Yes, but that can be resolved. It's a short distance of steepness, not anything like what you gotta deal with here for water and sewer. And long ways. That one there, it does, it goes up. You can buy the house right next door to what I know is for sale. And you can take a lot of that out, do a lot of different things. I mean, I can't believe that up on that hill is the place for a school. That just makes absolutely no sense at all to me. And you can do anything if you've got enough money. There are so many variables to this that you want to pay attention because it's going to cost you a fortune. Thank you.
So if you get people, yeah, if you'd like to speak, if you could line up, that would help us. Yeah, yeah.
A question in reference to the cost for this particular piece, the 900,000. Where are we on the list of building aid, should building aid come back? Are we 1, 2, 3, 10? Are we even in the ballgame to get building aid should it come back? We are. Where are we? What position are we in?
The Department of Education reassesses as applications come in. We are not far down the list as at last update that we got. As we move forward with this process, that improves our standing. We can't even qualify for the process for building aid until we have a piece of land and a plan that we are shovel-ready for.
Okay, thank you. And my next question is, when do you anticipate building aid being reinstituted in the state budget?
We can't anticipate that.
So, so in essence, we could buy this property and not get building aid ever again, or maybe in the distant future. Is that right?
That is correct.
So what happens if that does take place? What do we do with this? Sell it?
We would consider selling it if this was something that the taxpayer would not ever consider footing the full cost for, then that would be an option.
So this is quite a gamble that we're taking because we don't know the magic number for building aid, when it's going to come back. I know this can happen, yes, but if building aid, and it doesn't look like it's going to happen right away. I was talking with one of our representatives recently, and they'd like to see it come back, but they're not sure it's going to be right away.
Right, they are dealing with specific pieces of legislation that have been presented. We don't know where they're going to go.
So this could go right by the, that's why what Bud was saying, maybe in a, I'm sorry, not Bud, but maybe this isn't going to happen at all. I mean, we may be going through this, spending the $900,000, and some of us might be more than retired when the building aid comes back. I mean, like I might be dead, but.
I understand that concern.
I'm not wishing that on anybody, but that could happen. I know Jim Ramsey and I probably won't be here, but.
The challenge we have, though, John, is Lakeway still needs to be dealt with. What do we do with Lakeway? No matter what happens with building it, no matter what happens with this piece of property, we still have a school that has significant needs that have to be addressed.
And I couldn't agree with you more, but maybe that other piece of property up there off of Richmond Street, that's a beautiful piece of property, and it's safe, it's up on a hill, and I don't know that it would cost any more to develop that than develop this. I'm not saying these gentlemen haven't done their due diligence, but they probably didn't know about this property. This is a beautiful property with beautiful views.
Well, all of the properties that have been looked at in all of the previous studies, the Eaton property was involved in all of those studies. And what was it, three Lakeway commissions all came to the same conclusion, that that property was not going to be as ideal as Greenwood Acres.
But, you know, when that land was purchased, that was the idea, was to put the new Lakeway and maybe a new Littleton High School all up there. That's, I mean, that's why we spent that money, to do that. That's why I voted for it. That's what I thought was going to happen, and now it's up there just doing nothing.
I can't answer that. That's way before my time.
No. But anyway, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so who, you guys lining up to speak? Did I hear somebody over here that wants to speak? Next, okay.
Steve Kelly. I guess I will speak as a member of the Budget Committee that reviewed all this and obviously voted to approve it. I was involved, as was Bud Foster, in the acquisition of the Eaton property, roughly 100 acres that we bought. At that time, the driving force for that, it shows you how things change over time, was the lack of athletic fields available in the town of Littleton. It's hard to believe today, but you know, at that day and age, if you would, Renwick Park, the Little League Field, Apthorpe Common was busy every night of the week, and you had a hard time having enough time to play Little League games, to say nothing about having to practice. Shows you how the demographics can shift over time. Miss Blaisdell is here looking at me because her father and I frequented that field on many an occasion, and I think she was there at a slightly younger age. But anyway, you know, a lot of things that have shifted over time. That Eaton property is one fine piece of property. Maybe it's best used today. You know, the town of Littleton is something that you have a hard time getting the town to buy something. Once they own it, getting them to sell it can be a much larger challenge. That piece of property is a great piece of property, and I guess the thought in the back of my mind has always been that if and when we have a building boom come back, that would that would warrant somebody investing in building some high-end houses there, which would also be good for our economy. That would be a great thing for that piece of property. Could a school be built there? I believe it could. But I think the other consideration, and Ann, you can obviously help me out on this, is that one of the things that's happened in the last 20 years is that 20 years ago, we weren't as concerned about evacuation plans from one building to another. I think that the proximity of these two locations, they're far enough apart to be safe, but close enough to be used. I think that's part of the discussion involved here. Obviously, the Eaton property would be one long walk, so I'm not saying that's the only thing that should be considered, but that's part of it. It's a big ask for the town of Littleton, and obviously we never do anything fast. For those of you who certainly remember recent history, building the police department and rebuilding the highway department. There's a lot of effort that went into that. It didn't happen quickly, but once we did it, we got it right, and that tends to be our history. So this plan has been vetted quite well. I certainly got to agree with Bud. I mean, there's no absolutes here, but it's the best you can determine using all the resources available. I think we've come up with a reasonable plan, and maybe the most critical part of it, I mean, to think that we could do this project without building aid would be a huge, huge ask for the town of Littleton. But the political reality is that Concord wants us to make a commitment and show that we have things in place ready to roll. So the fact that we're going to spend this kind of money over the next 5 years and get this site ready and engineered and structured for this, certainly hoping that building aid will be coming back. It's hard to tell, but the stuff you hear on the street is, somewhere in the 2, 3, 4 year range. There's no guarantees on that until the gavel is slammed in Concord. But having said all that, I think it's as reasonable a plan as we're going to come up with, and the current building and the options of doing something with that. We've all been in those situations in our lives. Do we reinvest where we are now, or do we build new? Looking at this situation, the age of the building, its location on Union Street, which is a bit dangerous in and of itself, just because of the traffic flow and the fact that you only have one point of access and egress from the building. I think the school board's come up, and the committee that Ralph headed have come up with a reasonable plan, and I think it's something that the town of Littleton needs to support. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Ralph Hodgman. I was the chairman of that lead back committee. I just want to say that we looked, and I personally walked at least 16 different sites. And one of the commitments we received was that in order to build a new school, you have to have 5 acres for the school and 100 acres for every student that you plan on having in the school. 1 acre, I'm sorry, 1 acre. 1 acre for every 100 students. Wow, okay. So we were looking at a minimum of 10 acres, all right? But the school building and the parking, that's 10 acres right there. If that's all you got is 10 acres, you're not going to be able to have the athletic fields, you're not going to be able to have the playground or any of that other stuff in there. So we basically sat down and said, we need a minimum of 20 acres. We looked at a lot of land. Where in Littleton, that's fairly close to town, do you have 10 acres of buildable land that's not in wetlands, doesn't have a lot of granite rock and it's going to be blasted away? I looked at the land that's up there where those 2 barns used to be, those 2 historic barns, and thought maybe where that palace used to be would be a nice place for the school. But it takes a lot of blasting and a lot of work up in there. So all the lands that we looked at, and we put all the pros and cons together, this was by far the best place, the easiest to get into. I do know that we'll have an issue with Elm Street. If we go from that corner of Oak Hill and Elm down to Main Street, that's going to be a problem. For one thing, there's no sidewalk on that last part, and we have to have sidewalks. The street's going to have to be widened, and they're going to have to take out the springs that are underneath that road to tear it up every year. But coming up Oak Hill Avenue, that's where the buses come up now for the high school and the middle school. They come right up Oak Hill. It's just a little bit further up into there, around the school and back out again. This was by far the best piece of land we could come up with. The other thing we're thinking, if you look at where Tuck Lane is, along that Tuck Lane, those are all houses in those little pieces of property. On this side, those are buildable properties for homes, but there's no homes in there right now. Now, just think, if we put in a brand-new elementary school, and there's still over 100 acres up there on the hill that are available for sale, think about the housing developers that can be put up there, because if you build a new elementary school, houses and people will come. And one of the issues that Littleton has is we're growing tremendously economically with industry and commercial, but our population has not grown since 1970. We're running at the same population we had. We need to be able to build reasonable houses, and a new school will bring families in, along with all the industries we want to bring in. We need people to be able to work in these industries. That's a beautiful area up in there, all around that school, to build houses. This was the best property. This was going to be the most economical for us to be able to work and put a school into there. So that's what I want to say about that. Thank you.
Franco Rossi. I want to just, the discussion seems to be turning towards whether this is the right property or not. I just would like everybody to remember that the bond that's being considered tonight, the acquisition of the property is only a part of it. If you choose, if some idea to whether to use the Eaton property or whatever else it is, the $900,000 bond doesn't go away entirely, because you've still got the engineering costs and all those things related. It's only the marginal cost of the acquisition of the property. And I want to just express publicly my opinion that recognizing that this is the best property for the school, that again, the marginal cost makes it worthwhile, and looking for another use for that Eaton property or whatever other properties we might have is an appropriate course of action.
Thank you. Brian was next.
Brian Ward. I was the public spokesman working with Bud and Steve when the Eaton property was acquired. And as Steve said, this property was not acquired to build a school on. It was acquired as a potential use for athletic fields. It's a wonderful piece of property. If you put your backside against Simon's Market, you look up over that. There's access from Man's Hill. There's access from Hill Street, going through what was known as the Pest House property, which is about 12 or 13 acres that this adjoined. There's access to it that was developed and cut on Richmond Street, and then goes to Sampson Road. It's a wonderful piece of property. However, the contour of that property is consistent with the rest of Littleton. We're built along the river, and you live on one side of the river, and you look across the street, and you see the other side of the river. This piece is a spectacular piece with views. When it was acquired, there'd only been two prior owners since 1859. That was known as the Bowman Lot. It was purchased by Stephanie Eaton's great-grandfather in 1903, and then the town bought it. The property, if you look at Remick Park, the property, if it was ever developed for recreation or something else, it's kind of cantilevered that has different levels. You have the pool at one level, you have the soccer and baseball field at another level, you have the Little League at the level, then you have the playground at a level. That's how the Eaton property was envisioned, that we would have different levels because that's the contour of the property. But it was originally recreation, not school. Was language included? A potential that it could be used for school? Absolutely. But it was never explored fully for that because that wasn't the driving force. And the reason that it should be clear that it was is the town acquired the property, not the school district. And because the school district never, I don't know if they acquired the property, but the original went to the town managed it, and as a matter of fact, the park commission were given the authority to log it, and I believe they generated approximately $27,000 worth of income from a selected cut, which they used for reinvestment into our system. So that's the history in the Eaton property. Building aid. I was in the legislature when Governor Lynch proposed to suspend building aid. I stood up and gave a sound-reminder of a speech. All of the cards were decked. Everybody was in favor of suspending it. And I remember saying to them, don't do it. If you do away with it, it had been in place since 1955, you'll probably never get it back. Well, I came back to my seat after giving my stand-reminder of the speech, and my seatmates asked, said, great speech, how many votes do you think you're going to get? I said, 50. There's 400 in the legislature. I got 48. The deck was stacked to do away with building aid. However, there's a second model that the state follows for building aid. Your CTC here, originally in the 70s, the state of New Hampshire realized we were losing a lot of students that were dropping out, and the CTCs were built. There's 23 of them throughout the state, and the CTCs, they built 2 per biennium, 1 a year, where they would fund the complete. Originally, they paid for the 100% of the property, and then you operated it, which is an expensive operation. We did the reorganization to prepare. Now, the reorganization, Ann made reference to the addition in 1982. We added 4 classrooms and a multi-purpose at Lakeway, and that was so we could have K through 6 at Lakeway. We moved the middle school from the old high school, or the old middle school wing, to St. Rose, and that's where 7 and 8 went. And then we took, if those of us remembered, Budwood came in just before our senior year. There were 8 portable classrooms on the front of the high school. And they were 13 years old, and we removed them. Anybody remember where they went?
Yeah.
Continental 93. And they were used until they literally, we used to joke, I think Bud and I we used to call them in high school, we call them the recollapsibles, because they actually were called the relocatables. But they eventually were relocated, but what had to happen was that in '82, we had to do that to prepare the site of the first CTC. And the way the legislature is going to work is that they follow this model. There's going to be building aid money, but it's not going to be the old formula where you develop it, send them the bill, and they pay it. There's only going to be a certain amount of money, and you got to be prepared. You got to own the site, you got to have your plan, you got to be ready to go. And that's different than what building aid was before. I believe we will get building aid at some point, there's no question. We have the state-of-the-art 1950 elementary school. The only building in Littleton that the town owns that has not been renovated since that time period is the green building at the park. That was built in 1930. It's only 20 years older than Lakeway. What's that? Right. Yeah, it has. It's been condemned, John. Absolutely. The park commissioners did the same thing the school boards have done. They stretched the life out of that building just like the school boards have done here. So we're at a point now, we need to be prepared so that we can receive building aid. If we're not prepared, we're not going to get it. So that's why this is an incremental step to prepare us for Lakeway. Is this a perfect site? Absolutely not. Unfortunately, we don't have any perfect sites. And is it closer to where our neighborhoods are? Absolutely. Are we going to build it without building aid? I don't think so. So there's a few more steps to take, but if we don't take this step, we're not going to be in position to take the building aid that we'd all like to receive. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, Ron, go ahead, then Frank. If you, yeah.
Ron Bolt, member of the committee. I would just like to point out that one of the approaches we took on the committee, and this was an advisory committee, and was, but our recommendations were accepted by the board, was to take a fiscally responsible approach to this. And by that, I mean that we all very quickly came to the realization that a $20 million bond was never going to pass. So we came up with a strategy, the first phase of which is to ask for the $900,000, as Brian said, to get the land and the plan and be ready. Next step would be raising the moratorium on building aid. That could happen as early as this year. It could happen 5 years from now. We don't know. But we want to wait for that building aid. Failing that, the third possibility would be to wait until the existing bonds on both the school and the town age off. That begins very early. The $6 million debt that we owe to TransCanada, that bond is, I think, 1 year away from maturing. There are 2 school bonds. One is going to mature in 2022, another one in 2027. So that would be our third approach if we don't get the building aid. And we're going to try to wait till those bonds age off and then bring a construction bond forward. So please recognize that tonight we're only talking about a $900 bond and nothing else is in concrete. $900,000.
So Frank, you still want to go?
No, because, yeah, why not? It's gonna be on the,
I'm on the opposite side of this thing. There's all kinds of talk about spending money.
Your name is still Frank.
I'm sorry, Frank Graham, excuse me. What's being done with the Eaton property? Why isn't that somebody up here, a real estate, saying, hey, look, we can get you whatever for that? We're talking about spending a bunch of money. Come on now. I mean, I can't, if I don't work, I don't get paid. We don't, we've got to start looking at the other side of this. Thank you.
Welcome. Anyone else? Are you ready for the,
No.
Steve? No?
I don't look as old as I am, but it takes me a little longer to get here. Steve Height. Question, has there been, with all the things that are going wrong with the elementary school as it is now, is there a timeline for condemning it? I mean, are we looking at 5 years that this thing is so sick and so bad that we've got to burn it because it's a health and safety issue to disinfect it? Number 2, is the property that it's on, if the building was gone, how big is the lot that elementary sits on? I mean, if the building wasn't there, can we dig back into that bank and utilize that? I mean, we want to save from the face of the building because we've already put in however many millions to make that look pretty that did nothing for inside, but what's the scoop with the building itself and the timeline?
Number one, I don't know when the state will condemn it, but we have to report to them every year. And number 2, Lakeway Elementary sits currently on 10 acres of land. The 5 acres you can see right in front of the building. The other 5 acres are so steep that it's really not buildable.
Well, equipment digs into things like that retaining wall, so the footprint of the thing is still what it is. So,
Right.
all right, on this property up here, from a bank's standard, all right, we buy this piece of property, it doesn't get used. Is the chance of selling it to do something else, would a bank lend money for the conditions? As a municipality, you can get away with whatever you want to do. Somehow enough money will buy a building lot on a piece of property. But that doesn't mean that lending institutions would want to give money for it, or as much as we would be into it. Has anybody thought about that part of the thing? The other part of my question, another question to think about, has anybody... Too many questions at a time?
No, and just didn't understand.
I need to understand your second question.
Well,
Third question.
if we bought this property, the Greenwood property, and it was decided not to use for whatever reason, like the Eaton property that it's at there, would this land, with its wetland basis and everything, would a lending institution lend money to somebody that wanted to subdivide it and build? Yes, no?
I think, Melanie Nelson, I think what you're asking is it bankable, is it financeable? The question is, yeah, everything is. I've actually been involved where the bank has been involved with financing, and you'd have to do the background work, you'd have to do the wetlands project and all of that, but is it marketable? Sure, it's marketable.
But would it be feasibly marketable?
Yes.
I mean, for someone to put in all that much money into it to build a house lot?
Yeah, because of the accessibility. It really is an in-town lot that already has an ingress to it. So egress is good, ingress is good, so it's financeable that way. It all depends even what you would want to put on it, what the bank would look at to see the turnaround, what the value would end up being. Most of the time when you buy something like that, you buy it with the idea of what you're going to do with it.
Right.
So it's
Well,
very
I didn't
subjective.
know the number for the property, but because the school system wants to get it, we can get a lot of money for it. Can we recoup that money back that the investment was, the number? That's what my concern was. Or are we selling it for 10 cents on a dollar if that happened?
Yeah, the property
Okay.
was permitted 10 years ago to do that, so. Is that, I'm not sure I'm answering your question right there.
I know,
I'm not sure your question.
I know, no, you're not the only one, everybody thinks that.
Nellie, yeah, he might want to answer that.
Hi, Keith McVeigh from One at Pagenstone. I believe that property was permitted, Steve, 10 years ago, if I'm correct, for a subdivision. That's the case.
Permitted for subdivision, yeah.
Yeah, but they said that the Eaton property was good 10 years ago, too. Okay, one other question. In the research of properties and land, the hospital was gifted 200 and whatever acres up there, right on nice flat ground, all kinds of things, and out in the woods, and hiking trails, biking trails, possibilities of expansion there. Was there any communication with them or consideration to maybe put something out there on that old farm property, which is flatter ground and more compatible to a lot of things than as another possibility for a location?
Sure.
We didn't look specifically at the hospital area out there, but the committee, in all of our dealings and what we talked about and taken into consideration, one of the things we didn't want to do was get too far out of town. First of all, if you go way out there, you've got to bus all the kids. Right now, a lot of kids don't have to be bused up here at this property. This is within walking distance for a lot of children. So we don't have to create more bus lanes. We don't have to create more buses. We didn't want to put kids too far out of town. A lot of parents walk back and forth to the schools. They can walk here and pick up their kids. They don't have to drive out there to pick them up. And we felt that the parents who have little kids in the school, these are elementary kids, they'd want to keep their kids in closer. So we did look at one piece of property right there in the corner as you turn to go to the new hospital, right there in the corner. And even now, we thought it was too far out because you've got to bus all the kids to that location. Nobody's going to be able to walk to that location. So therefore, we ruled out anywhere that wasn't within the immediate town area.
I personally have a hard time accepting that in that I live in a place in the outside where the big yellow bus goes by, and 9 times out of 10 when it goes by my house at 12 minutes to 7, there's 3 kids in there, and I don't know how many more they pick up. And the buses are out there anyway, so whether they go from this way to that way, or that way to this way, it's the same busing, same town. And as far as I observed, there are fewer kids taking the bus and a lot more mom and dads taking the kids to school because they can't go on the bus. That's just not the thing you do. I'm sorry. When we moved here, we had to walk a mile down to the bus. And the bus went right by our house, but because we were a mile from where the big bus came, we had to walk. So whatever. But there's a lot more room for expansion out there. There's plenty of parking. And with the number of people going back and forth to that hospital, somebody could drop off and pick up a kid. I just don't, all the fight for parking, all the things that are going on in town, the congestion's getting wicked, and you got no room for expansion down the road. You make something too nice, too fancy, we get more people moving in that are bringing in more handicap or special needs children, and then we gotta do more expansion because even that 29 acres will get thrown out. Looking down the road 100 years or 50 years that this one's been, I think you're too confined and you don't have big room for expansion for down the road. I mean, look, I too was graduated here. This building here is 4 or 5 times bigger than it was when I was here, and my class was the largest class that graduated from school. And now we don't have as many kids, so we got 5 times built. I don't know where this is going to go, but not just now, not just jump and buy it to have it and then not work out. I'm real scared. You know, and then it's 16 million. So what do? Drop the budget 4 million for the next 5 years to try and budget ourselves so that when we get there we can pay for it? How are you going to do that? I mean, you only got 5,000 or 6,000 people here supporting all this stuff that's going on. Yeah, it's great that we're bringing in all these people. We're originally giving jobs to all kinds of people that are not tax contributors, and the burden on those residents that have been here holding on, it's kind of crazy and scary at the same time. Thank you.
Next.
Tom, I just want to address the issue that Steve was talking about with Millie as far as wetlands and if they're compatible with residential building. I serve on the Conservation Commission with several other members in this room, and it's our duty to review any development in this land, whether in this town, whether it's residential or commercial, that impacts wetlands. And the definition of wetlands that the DES has developed today, there's very little room to maneuver. If you've got a certain little fern called a sensitive fern that happens to grow in a wet patch on your otherwise dry land, you're dealing with wetlands. You have to get permits if they allow it. You have to apply for a wetlands permit, whether it's just a little driveway crossing or anything more. And it's not inexpensive. The latest commercial wetlands permit that was allowed by the DES in this town is the spot across from the TJ Maxx development down on Meadow Street, where in our race to develop every last inch of land in this town, the DES allowed the developer to relocate Dell's Brook. So if you've got enough money, that's one of the ways to barrel your way through these situations. That particular permit required the developer to put up $100,000. So the costs are not insubstantial. Even for residential areas, they figure on a square footage. And so a lot of residents who might want to buy a piece of land would take a second look at that and decide, I'll look somewhere else. Either I'll build somewhere else or I'll buy a house in town already built. It was probably built on land that was more suitable for building purposes in the past. So wetlands is not an inconsiderable thing that should be talked about here. And to just, with a wave of the hand, say, yeah, they'd lend you money for that, there'd be some consultation going on and some opening of the pocketbook before any of that could take place. The other thing I want to just mention, as time goes by, it's true that situations do change. The Eaton property seems like that situation has changed. We talk about possibility of condemning Lakeway. If you recall, the St. Rose School that was built in the 50s and housed the middle school for a number of years, and we have some teachers in the room here that taught at that school. One day the verdict came down that that was not a safe structure to educate children in anymore, and so we had to move those classes over into the high school. And apparently something changed in the meantime, because if you go to that building today, there are students in that building again today. So I just want to emphasize the point, not that it's the present school board, but just a history of what's going on in this town, whether the Eaton property was good and now it's not good, whether the St. Rose's School isn't any good anymore and now it is good, causes a lot of taxpayers who've lived in this town long enough to see this history question the credibility of some of these decisions in a long-term situation. Thank you.
So I think Bud was next, Bruce, but right behind Bud.
All right, Bud Foster.
Of course.
Can I address that last question?
Who wants to speak?
I'd like to address that last question.
All right, so hang on, Bud, for a second, and Leslie wants to speak as well.
Yeah, I'd just like to respond to Tom's comments about what is now the Littleton Academy. It doesn't house very many students, and so we do have a kind of a waiver from the state to use it for a small number of students who are educated there, and it is a good learning environment for them to be separated and have that space. So we are utilizing it like that, but it isn't, we weren't going to be able to continue using it for the full 7th and 8th grade student body. So.
Yeah, I just want to comment on the, you know, you talk about the history of this land going back to the 60s and 70s and whatever. There have been 3 committees since 2008 that have studied the new school. We need a new school. It's going to happen. These 3 committees, one in 2008, one in 2016, and our committee today, all came up with the same conclusion. This is the best piece of property we've had in town. So when you're talking about all these committees way back in the 60s, things have changed. Education's changed, the buildings have changed, property changes. You know, rocks grow, believe it or not, in New Hampshire. Where a piece of property don't have any rocks on it in 1960, today it might be nothing but rocks. So we got to look at today. Today, we've had, since 2008, 3 full-fledged committees have done a lot of work on this study. All 3 committees came up with the same property. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bud?
Yeah, I'm kind of going to get into some money issues on this whole thing. You know, the $900,000, that's a lot of money to put out not knowing if or when we're ever going to get the aid back. We're dealing with something I don't think anybody in this room is thinking about. Mr. Bolton just said we got 6 years left to pay on the bond we had to get to pay off TransCanada. Right now, TransCanada is paying 21.7% of the school taxes, and probably another 10% of the town taxes. That's a lot of money, and any time we lose that TransCanada money, we're going to be in a world of hurt. We're living in a Trojan horse. People are looking like this money system is going to keep on going forever. It's like when you're working every day for a living, and then you retire. Guess what? You got a lot less money to live on than what you had when you were working. Hopefully, you got enough to get by. But there's a lot of elderly people in this town living on Social Security and small investments. When everybody comes in and wants more money, more money, more money, they hear 900,000 for this, 2 million, 20 million for this. We need a new sewage treatment plant. Everything, I mean, somewhere there's got to be some give and take to this, especially when your student enrollment is so much less than what it was 40 years ago. 50 years ago, when I graduated from this school, like Ryan alluded to, we had the portable classrooms, not saying that was a hot setup, but it was 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and it was 110 to 120 kids in every class. More kids here than there is in the whole school system. And you got buildings that are 3 or 4 times bigger. I just don't understand how this can work this way. In Berlin, my daughter is a teacher, Brown Street School up there, closing down. Poof, they're out. They're going to another building that they're already using for school. They're trying to save money because they have been in an economic crunch up there since the paper mill went out. And we can be in the same economic crunch if TransCanada figures a way to shut our cash supply down. And don't you believe for a second that they're not trying to figure out a way to do it. If they're good business people, which I'm sure they are going to look to save every $1 million they can. And if they can cut $3 million off the tax rolls from here, Wilton, they're going to do it. And who's on the hook for it? Once you sign on for all these bonds, you got them whether you want them or not. There is no, ooh, I made a mistake. I guess I shouldn't have traded cars. Well, I'll take that back and sell and buy a used car. You're in. There's no walking away. You people are living with a Trojan horse, and I don't think anybody up here is paying any attention to it hardly. So thank you very much.
Bruce?
Bruce Hadlock. I got 2 or 3 questions. The first one is, I know that any school is built to requirement they have to have a full sprinkler system.
Talk into the mic.
Can't hear you.
A little closer, Bruce.
Anytime you have a school built, it's a requirement that you have to have a sprinkler system. It's the same thing on the Eaton property. I'm not sure that they could even build up there on that property because of not having adequate, because it's side hill, it's done. What's the water pressure here?
Union Street, it's 100.
No, I'm asking him.
So, from what I understand, the water tower is at just beyond the end of Elm Street, and our plan is to come off of Elm Street with the water main along this access road and down to the school.
I can give you water, but what's the water pressure?
Well, we don't know until we can start doing those kind of studies specifically, but we have been in contact with the utility and asking them, is this going to be adequate? And they've assured us that the plan is viable the way it is.
That's to supply you with water. I'm talking water pressure. You coming here and you're speaking, you should already tell us what the water pressure is here.
So what the warrant article is looking to provide is fees for us to do that work.
And I'm not necessarily against buying something, but I am against spending your money on you and all these other things out of it, whether there's an unknown, we don't have any fiscal ability to say you're going to build a building. Why would you go out and spend all this engineering, even if you bought this? It's just not, it's crazy because you don't know if you're ever going to get it. So it would be wasting our money to be hiring you to come back in here if you bought the building, or buy the property.
We've contacted the utility company.
I want to know, yeah, you might have contacted them, that's a pod, but do you have adequate water pressure?
We've contacted them to ask those questions, and it appears that the project is viable based on what they've told us, and that the fees that you're going to be voting on will allow us to do the studies to ensure that there is enough water pressure.
And if we don't have water pressure, what do?
You put in a pump.
That's right. Costs a lot more money, whether it's here or at the other property that they already own. It's the same facility.
So we looked at 2 options, and one was to come off of Oak Hill Ave, but then that does go uphill, and that would require a pump. So we looked at the cost difference with that. And then we talked to the utility, and they said we could come this direction and probably not require the pump. So that's as much as we've gotten because that's what we have for fees to date. And that's why there's this warrant article to provide more fees so we can do the studies to answer all those questions. Wetlands.
We don't be, it's a waste of our money to be hiring you to go and do that stuff without having, that's what I'm trying to get at. I didn't say buy the property.
but I'm not saying spend the money over here for you people within that bond issue. That's nuts, kind of thing, not to be getting that part, not knowing that you're gonna do it. Second question that I have, has any on your study people on it, the law says that you have to have busing within a 2-mile radius. So if you bought this property, you can't, your 2-mile radius is going to be different. When I grew up, I grew up on Church Street. And I used to go down to the post office because they could supply it and deal with it within the 2-mile radius of what it was there. How many students going up Far Hill and towards the St. Johnsbury Road are not going to be able to turn around and have busing if this particular piece of property? Have you studied that? Cost, I'm talking about, that's a cost of operations, no matter what you do, whether it's here, the nuns, or anything else on this. Busing is expensive, and you haven't taken that into consideration, not to my knowledge.
Bruce, I just want to make sure I'm understanding your comment. So you're stating that with the busing by the new location of the elementary school, that it would increase, I guess you're saying it would decrease actually, because as you moved out towards the hospital, they would be closer. You think they'd be a little bit closer and might fall within the 2-mile radius? Is that your, I just want to make sure I understand.
I'm asking the question, whether it's this piece of property or any of them, busing is expensive. That's a cost of operations when you get done. You need to take wherever you decide to buy or anything like this, and you need to draw a circle, take your 2 miles into consideration. And the people in this town need to know if their kids in turn are going to fall into the position of having no buses. Or are you going to have to provide more buses because of the cost of operations as to wherever you buy? That's a legitimate question that should have been approached and should be in here no matter what when you're asking people to do it.
I agree with you, and Ralph, did that get considered, that sort of angle? But I think this site is fairly close to the high school, you know, so
It doesn't make any difference.
Well, but we're already busing into the high school, you know, so, there is that, you know, that is a piece of it.
Well, I think somebody needs to draw it, and they should have the answers to that before you do it.
Yeah, again, what we took into consideration, we knew exactly what you're talking about. We studied that. And we thought, well, if it's within the town, somewhere within the town, the Main Street area, the town, uphill, there's going to be kids that are going to have to walk, there's going to be kids that are going to be bused. There's going to be kids from where elementary school is now will have to be bused up, so it's going to include it.
No, I'm not asking you the way you're presenting it, Ralph. I'm asking if you've actually geographically drawn a circle.
No, we did not.
And knowing where the 2 miles is so people could know, and if it's going to cost people extra money. You need to know that when you make
You know,
decisions.
we don't have all the answers. We've done the best we can to come up with what do our kids need in the future, and they need a new school. Where do we need a new school? There's a lot of details. There's still 3 committees out there. One of them's a design committee, another one's a finance committee, and they're all going to have part of this once we get through this part of it. Our concern here is if we don't get through this part this year, we're dead in the water. We can't do nothing. Because if we do get state aid back, and I've talked to Linda Massili, I've talked to Eric Hennessy, one of our committee members just talked to Mr. French. We've talked to pretty much all of the representatives, and they're not committing anything, but they're all feeling pretty good that state aid's going to happen. And like Brian said, what has to be done is you have to be ready for state aid. That's what we're working on. We've got to be ready. If we're not ready, if we don't get this part this year and get ready for state aid, we're going to be doing the same thing next year, and the next year, and we're just going to be putting it up. But as far as the busing goes, we just want to make sure that we don't have to bus every kid in town. We did not draw a 2-mile circle. Okay, and if you look at the distance between Greenwood and where the current elementary school is, they're pretty much going to cross. If you drive the 2-mile circle, they're going to cross each
There's
other.
a very easy way of doing it. If you draw a 2-mile circle with
I know
with a
that.
protractor around it, you can answer the questions. You're coming up with nothing but nothing.
Okay, we haven't got that far. That's all I can tell you at this point.
That's number one. Number two, or three, I guess, that I have on, you're already paying at the elementary school for rents and parking lots, and I think it's close to $30,000 a year. 22,000, which if you redid to someplace else, that would go away. My first question is, do you have long-term commitments? Are they 20 years? Are they 1 year, 3 years? I just don't want to get stuck moving something and get stuck paying rents.
No, we don't have that.
What do you have?
Contract.
What do you have?
Okay, do we have an answer?
Bruce, what is your question?
My question is,
Long-term commitments on the
do you have a long-term commitment where if somebody tears down the elementary school or buys it or something like this on it, have we got to stay here and pay for the 20 years? Can you sign a long-term lease? I don't know. I'm asking.
So you're talking about our current parking?
Yes, that's roughly $20,000 a year.
Yes, we
And-
usually have a 3-year commitment from the owner of that property. And then we have a 1-year commitment from the owner of the Faith Bible property. Will that go away if we have a new school? Definitely, because we will have our own parking space. The thing that won't go away if we don't build a new school is Union Street has so much more traffic on it, and we've had a child get hit within the past 2 years.
All I asked you to answer was
I know.
the question. I'm not asking about that, because that can
I know.
happen at any place. All I wanted to know was if it's there. Thank you very much. But I am not in favor of, I'm not saying don't buy the land, but I'm not in favor of going ahead and spending all this extra money out of it with you don't know if you're ever going to get it, you don't know if you're ever using it. That's like a waste of money as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
I don't know how to do it, so.
Okay, somebody, are we looking for a response over there? No? Okay, next.
My name is Roger Merrill. I see a plan here. I don't know what the actual footprint of the school is or building is, but I understand we're buying 26 acres. Want to buy 26 acres. Could you tell me what the potential purchase price of the land is? I know you got $900,000 for the purchase of land and studies and all this. What is the land value?
Can't tell you that yet. We're still in negotiations, but we are talking about it. Well, we don't have a set price yet.
Well, it's 26 acres. Is it $10,000 an acre, or is it $20,000 an acre? No idea, no idea.
I have an idea. I wouldn't be fair to stand up here and say it. I don't know an idea.
So you're asking for $900,000, but you can't tell us what the purchase price of the land would be, or approximately up to 900. Okay, thank you.
All right, are you ready for the question? Yes? Okay. So the question is in advance. Are you ready to stop discussion and then put what we've talked about, which would be the motion that's on the floor, on the ballot for the March 12th meeting? Ready for that question?
If you don't have a purchase and sales agreement, how can somebody make an adjustment and say, okay, we're going to buy the property, and you don't have a price? I can't believe that you are asking us to do that, because I could stand here and want to make an amendment that we do away with these people on the engineering, and not go for 900,000. Maybe we'd go for 500,000 or whatever it is. But I can't believe you people in that hole sitting here asking anybody when you don't have a purchase and sales agreement on anything.
Bruce, the idea of the warrant is to potentially purchase a property.
Well,
This is our first choice.
and it's not
But
a
we
big,
can't
you
go
still
forward.
don't do first choice if you don't do anything without a purchase and sales agreement, no matter what it is. You people in turn shouldn't be up here presenting it to anybody, especially when you're asking us to possibly come in here and amend something to do away with these people over here. How can you amend it if you don't know what the purchase price is on the thing on it, and
Which
you don't
is-
have a purchase and sales agreement?
Which is why the
So-
language
so-
states up to $900,000. It could be a lot less than that. It's not going to be any more than that.
I'm critical of what you're doing on the
I
basis of
understand.
what it is and the fact that you don't have a purchase and sales agreement and the fact that I would like to possibly amend the thing. You can't amend anything because you don't have it to know. You
Because
don't
what-
have an answer to it.
So the question would be, to see if we're through discussing and if we're ready to vote on the article that was put on the floor an hour and a half ago.
Yes.
So do you want me to read the motion again? No. No? You have it in front of you, right? All right. Okay, the yes vote means that as we've discussed this, as discussed, right. Well, it's going to go on the ballot, but as presented. Now, somebody says they've got an amendment that they're waiting for or something like that. No, actually, when you vote, there's no amendment. When you vote, you're being asked to vote, are you ready to have what we've just discussed placed on the ballot for the March 12th election? Excuse me? Oh, you want to speak, Mike? Sure, of course.
Okay, two points. The first is a yes vote means this article goes onto the ballot as written. A no vote means you're going to continue to discuss it here tonight. Eventually, the article, either as written or as amended, if it does get amended, will go on the ballot. The second point or question is whether you can amend the $900 amounts that appear in two different places in this warrant article. You can. I don't know factually where that would leave you in terms of the project and the engineering and architectural work, but those $2 amounts can be amended if that's what the meeting decides to do.
Okay, so, are you ready? Excuse me? Okay, so all those in favor of placing this article on the warrant as read and presented and discussed, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no? No. So the ayes have it. So therefore, this article will be placed on the ballot as discussed and presented on the March 12th election. All right, so Article 3. Okay, all right. So before Article 3, Superintendent Nylas, excuse me? Okay.
I have a motion to restrict further discussion on Article 2. We don't want to reconsider it.
So the motion is that if you vote in favor of this motion, we won't reconsider this motion for the balance of the meeting. Okay, second? Second. Okay, discussion on that?
We need a name.
Yeah, who's the second? All right, So all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no? Okay, so this was a, kind of like a point of order, and